Hey guys, welcome back to Therapy Rocks and our talk about symptoms of complex PTSD. This again comes from the book, The Upset That Comes with Little, a handbook for trauma survivors struggling with spontaneous age regression, which is a form of emotional flashback that happens to most survivors of childhood, long-term severe childhood trauma. We are down to the symptom of avoidance of sex. So really, symptoms of complex PTSD, the avoidance of sex or hypersexuality could both be present for someone. If you think a little bit about childhood trauma, especially in situations where there's been sexual abuse, it would make perfect sense that as an adult, the person would want to completely avoid being sexual. And so, many times couples struggle with this because while they were courting or while they were dating, and maybe early in the marriage, there was no problem with sex, but as the relationship goes on, the person is more and more avoidant of sex. And that's sometimes because even being in a family environment can be triggering for a survivor. When they're living their single life, it's not as triggering, it's not as activating, it's not as dysregulating. But getting married and starting to have children can be activating in and of itself. Excuse me. So avoiding sex can also happen, obviously, because it activates, it reminds the survivor of their own sexual abuse memories. But also sometimes when there's been sexual abuse, this is a difficult thing for people to talk about, but when there's been sexual abuse, sometimes survivors and victims of sexual abuse have been eroticized to certain things sexually. So if they were sexually abused and pornography was involved, they may be aroused by sadistic pornography, sadomasochistic pornography, watching someone be raped. They've been sexualized to those kinds of images. So having sex can be difficult because they feel like they're sexually dysfunctional. And I've heard that from women before, and they're disgusted by it because they're sexualized to watching someone else be abused when they themselves were being abused. So this can get pretty complicated when we bring it into the realm of sexuality. So any questions about that, feel free to reach out. I'm sure there's other things that people might want to add. Maybe share with us situations that you've heard of or that you experience yourself of why you feel like you want to avoid sex. This is a big one. The felt sense of being different or defective. That's huge. We see that when I ask people to identify their negative beliefs about their trauma. One of the big ones is there's something wrong with me, I'm different, I don't belong, I'm defective. Okay? And you can imagine this is for a lot of reasons. Maybe they were directly told that. Maybe they inferred that because of how they were treated as a child. But this is a belief that gets locked in childhood. How often do we see people with long-term, early childhood trauma get neglected, abused? Maybe there's been attachment breaches where a parent went into the hospital because they were mentally ill, or into rehab, or maybe they only had one parent left. So there's been attachment wounds. There's been pervasive, profound neglect, sometimes physical neglect, not enough to eat, not a safe place to stay, emotional neglect, basically having someone not paying any attention to you, not meet your basic needs for dependency, your basic needs for affirmation and approval, and all of those things going on, and then try to go into a school system And, as a child, you walk into that school system and you still have your sticky tape open where mom and dad should be. And so you're trying to put your peers or your teachers into onto that sticky tape to meet your needs. People notice that. Other kids notice that. When you're little, your apparently normal part hasn't really been very well developed. And so there's no place to hide. You just have your emotional parts wide open. So you walk into a school system and then you get treated differently or rejected or seen as different, just because, other kids who are in the school system who have their needs met, who are well taken care of, they don't care if other kids say things about them or laugh at them. It just bounces off. But when you're a complex PTSD survivor in childhood, everything that comes your way sort of sticks to you. And then it just creates more and more shame. And so this felt sense that I'm different or I'm defective or something's wrong with me, it starts in childhood, and it gets really locked in there in childhood and can cause a lot of problems in adulthood. I'm just here to remind you that you are not defective, that you were born into a situation that you had no control over. The things that happened to you that made you feel that way, you had absolutely no control over. And you've just got a little kid part that's trying to live, a little kid part or parts that are trying to live in the grown-up world and trying to do the best job they can to fake it. And so that's what's going on. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are enough. Difficulty trusting is the last one we'll do. Difficulty trusting is a really big thing, and again, for a lot of the same reasons. When you cannot get your baseline security needs met from your parents at a young age, and major time of 0 to 2 is really an important time in a child's life in terms of attachment. And if you weren't able to get your attachment needs met during those years, then it just gets harder and harder and harder. Okay? So you can't trust other people because you don't have that muscle developed. You haven't first learned to trust the people that you were supposed to be able to trust. And many times, most of the time with complex PTSD, these are the very people that either neglected or abused you. And so what I notice with folks a lot of times is that when you were abused or neglected at a very young age, all people become scary. It doesn't matter, all authority figures become suspicious. And all people, you find yourself in a situation with anyone, you get nervous, dysregulated, activated, and it's difficult to trust. So obviously that causes problems in relationships because we really need to be able to at least trust that the person isn't going to harm us, that a person has our best interests in mind. And that can be a real difficult thing. Sometimes trauma survivors will test other people to see whether or not they can trust them. And there's a lot of behaviors that come out of that inability to trust that might look odd to someone who doesn't understand what's happening. So think about where you're at in your ability to at least trust other people to be people. Because let me flip it on you for a second. A lot of times childhood trauma survivors want to plug in to other people and expect them to almost reparent them subconsciously. This is not a conscious thing that you walk up to somebody and say, hey, will you this person looks like someone who might be able to reparent me. But a lot of times little kid parts will literally just plug in and have all these expectations and almost attach immediately. and then just get devastated or completely devalue the person once they see that they're not able to do that. So a lot of times I'll say to folks, you've got to unplug from that person, that your husband cannot reparent you. He's just not that good. Not to say husbands aren't good, but most husbands do not have the skills to reparent us. Okay, they can be part of our recovery if they're safe. They are not going to be able to reparent us. They're going to disappoint us a lot. But I always try to get people to understand and really notice the difference between being disappointed by someone in your grown-up brain, in your prefrontal cortex, versus that disappointment that comes from that child place, which is more of a devastation. I can't believe you could do that to me. I'm just so incredibly hurt because you didn't do the dishes, because you overdrew the checking account. Again, this $100 reaction to a 10-cent problem is a clue that maybe you're plugging into your partner or your close friends or people that you're in a relationship with, expecting them to give you things that only a parent would give. Because parents are supposed to be intuitive. They're supposed to anticipate what we need. They're never supposed to hurt us. They're never supposed to harm us. And so when we overreact to those kinds of things, then that should be a clue that that young part is running the show. Okay? And then you can go back and look at some of the ways you deal with that. And we'll be talking about that in the future. I don't know if I'll do another book, but I'll definitely do some more videos on how to cope with when the child part gets activated, because that's a big deal. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. Thanks, and have a wonderful day. And again, I just want to remind people that we're hoping to build a community here through Therapy Rocks, where people can get some help when they need it. People can reach out to each other, so that people will have a sense that they're not alone in this, and that they can get at least some support, some emotional support, some validation about what they're going through while they're going through it, especially with emotional flashbacks. So thanks, and we'll see you again soon. God bless.